Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Service Management Leadership Podcast with Jeffrey Tefertiller. Honored to have Alexander Golev. Hopefully, I said that with enough Russian. How are you doing, Alexander?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thank you, Jeffrey. Yeah, you said it correctly, by the way. It is exactly how my name sounds. So, yeah, I'm really glad to be here talking to you today. Let's begin.
Oh, yes. I appreciate you who this is English your second language and you speak it better than some of us that have been speaking it all our lives. So that's why I very much appreciate speaking to people around the world who know this space, this software asset space, the service management space so well. So, Alexander, you've been in the software asset management space for a long time. We won't say how long, but a long time. How'd you get started down this path?
I was I was lured by Microsoft. I started the company in 2003, and we did security audits. So we already knew the tool sets to use in audits. We already knew how it is, what people are afraid of, what's the word I'm looking for. We understood the whole concept of auditing someone for various purposes. And funny enough, in a couple of those audits, we also did licensing reviews. But we didn't know that software asset management exists. And after 2 years of having the company, I was in the Microsoft office, and there was a friend of mine who basically came to me in their cafe. We had a cup of coffee each, and he said, "By the way, Alexander, do you know what software asset management is?" I said, "No, obviously I didn't." And he said, "Let me show you." And he did a 40-minute presentation from his laptop, and I was completely what's the word I'm looking for again? I was sold.
Gobsmacked.
I was sold.
Gobsmacked. How about that?
I like it. And then we started next day. So we agreed with Microsoft on a marketing budget, and because I was the first in the country to even pronounce that, well, second after that friend of mine, I had all the exposure. The market wasn't there at all. So what we did in the first years, half of my time, which was fortunately paid by Microsoft, half of my time I was just raising market awareness, preparing other partners. There were a few companies that emerged as well in that space. We're still very big friends with each of them. They're my students. They're not even. I never considered them competitors. That's how I got into software asset management. So it was quite a long time ago, but I wouldn't say it was in the very beginning of SAM, because I think I was about 10 years late, if you count from the very first guidances on software asset management, ITIL wise. Yeah. So that's it. Very simple. Nothing special. I was just told software asset management exists, and I liked it. I liked it straight away. That's how.
It's an interesting viewpoint because you see software through a business lens, right? You see it at like, how do we maximize? I always use this, sounds like a riddle, but how do we use what we're paying for and pay for what we're using? And it's that balance.
Well, yes. You know what's interesting? What was interesting is that was instigated by Microsoft.
That
Instigated.
is funny.
It did. It was. My interest was actually woken up by Microsoft. That's more like a anyway. And you may think like Microsoft were only interested in ELPs in upsales, but at that time that wasn't true. Microsoft were genuinely, at least in Russia, were genuinely trying to build awareness of the whole idea of SAM, to build the culture. It was that was a country with an incredible level of piracy.
Yes.
When we started, I think we as Russians, we were at 75% of pirated software. That was rapidly going down in the next years. But we had to start somewhere. We had to create that culture together with Russia and Microsoft before I moved to the UK. So there was a lot invested into processes and awareness of what was brewing as the future ISO standard in 2006, ISO 19770-1. We actually, then again, with the financing from Microsoft, we developed the first training on ISO 19770. And one of my friends / competitors went even further. He connected with the Russian authorities that look after the standards. And ISO 19770, I think Russia was maybe the first country where it was adopted at the government level. And there was even a government-led certification, funny enough,
wow,
which still doesn't exist for the actual 19770 anywhere else, as far as I'm concerned. So, and obviously, you know, coming from the security audit background, we knew what businesses are struggling, as you rightfully said. We knew what businesses are struggling with. We had our own business. We also looked after our own licenses, although we were a small company. But we were compliant from the start. That was the point. And the reason we actually had those 2 licensing reviews is because the business asked us to can you also, in addition to our security review, look at our licenses, because they considered that a security risk. They considered that they didn't know what software is running in 2003. Even in the civilized world, there are still companies that don't consider that.
right. Even today.
Yes.
Even today, there's still people that don't know what they have, and they're exposed. So you specialize on Microsoft agreements and titles in the software asset management space. What's the common issue or misconception that companies have with their Microsoft agreements, and how should they begin assessing and addressing that situation?
I think, don't be surprised by the answer. I think the biggest issue is misunderstanding of those agreements, because at the same time, Microsoft licensing is easy and extremely hard. At the same time, Microsoft agreements are not very difficult to understand, but they contain some fundamental things you really need to understand. Unfortunately, I think the biggest problems stem from trusting too much, and I apologize to salespeople, but trusting too much to the messages that are delivered by salespeople. In many countries, for many years, for example, enterprise agreement was sold as an indulgence. Just sign an enterprise agreement and do whatever you want. And Microsoft is not the most aggressive company in regards to audits. It's not the most aggressive. It's not to say they don't do audits.
Right.
They still do. But you compare to any other vendor, say Oracle or SAP, they're not that nasty. So therefore, I think the biggest problem is because nobody really, very few companies, it's not the right thing to say nobody. Very few companies really have a grip on Microsoft licensing. And what I notice is if we disregard the non-compliant countries where there's no culture of being compliant, the bigger issue with Microsoft licensing is not non-compliance. The bigger issue is shelfware.
Yes.
As we had this dialogue with you before a week ago, right? And I really remembered that. And I like that phrase. And I hope you don't mind if I steal it. If you are in a surplus, that doesn't mean you're in the green.
Yes.
I don't remember the exact words, but that's the whole concept.
Yes.
And the biggest issue is that what I can see straight away, and I never failed this. I'm happy to put my money on it. I'm happy to bet that if a company has never done a proper enterprise agreement optimization before the renewal, I could come in and save straight away 30%. It was never below that number. That's how much they're wasting. It's incredible. It is truly incredible. Companies or public sector entities, especially because it's public sector, that is a much bigger issue than non-compliance. It's not to say there are no non-in-compliance / non-compliance issues. Yes, there are, but it's not. There's a tendency of buying too much,
Yeah.
and I think that and going back to your question, how do you overcome that? The solution is pretty simple. As I said, 30%. 30%. Think about say an organization of 3,000 seats. How much do they spend on Microsoft? Probably about 2 million a year.
Yes.
30% of that amount is 600K. I can't imagine someone charging that money for an optimization exercise. So you always get your return on investment. And I'm not even selling anything here.
Right.
All I'm saying is there's a lot of opportunity there, and it doesn't cost that much. You know, it's a scary thought that you need to pay for it. But that's the easy recipe again, because you'll save time, you'll save money at the same time, and you'll talk to someone who actually knows what they're doing. So that's and internally, I think I would suggest everyone, even if they're not even ready for that kind of engagement, just start getting grasp of the Microsoft basics of licensing. Just the basics. I'm not saying there's a lot of advanced stuff there. It took me 10 years to actually understand Microsoft licensing really well. But to begin that journey, to actually just start getting that grip, understand where you could be overpaying, where you might be non-compliant, you just need to learn the basics. And what's stunning is I really start questioning people's proficiency when I talk to a legal to head of a legal department, and they ask questions before the audit, at the very beginning of an audit. Do they have a right to audit us? It's written there.
Yes.
It's not. It's written in big friendly letters in plain English. It's not even a small print. Start from that. Look at that. Understand the basics, and then anyway, invite an SME so they could help you to start controlling how much you spend. I'm not even talking about cloud. That's a completely different matter. I'm talking about on-premises licenses that still exist and probably will be with us for another 5 to 10 years in some shape or form. Declining or not, they will be with us.
Right.
And there's a lot of money wasted on that. There are lots of opportunities uncovered, not yet uncovered.
Right. Plus, not only that, any savings, the other part that people miss is that 30% is off of today. Then that's 30% next year, 30% the year after, 30% the year after, plus Microsoft and every other publisher have built-in jumps every year, right? There's a little bit. And so it's an exponential savings more than a linear one. So,
well,
go ahead.
Sorry. There's a so-called, I call it renewal shock. Yeah. You know, when you sign an enterprise agreement, your price is fixed for 3 years. And then when you renew it, and effectively you just sign a new agreement, all that price lock goes away, and whatever increases Microsoft had in the previous 3 years could be up to 45%. So yes, you're right. And then, as you then again rightfully said, it's an annual cost. There's always OPEX in Microsoft licensing. It's not just CapEx.
Oh yes, and it compounds like interest. So can you explain some of the top Microsoft agreements and why it's important to understand the scope? And because you mentioned EULA, you mentioned an EA, there's lots of agreements, and people get confused on which one is applicable to which scenario.
Well, add to that you actually have to follow the market and follow what Microsoft are trying to sell and the changes that they introduce, because something that you may have known 5 years ago doesn't apply anymore. But the basic that you need to know today, there are 3 types of agreements that you really need to know today, unless you're a very small company. But if you are a small company, anything that I tell about enterprise agreement also applies to a so-called open value agreement. They're roughly similar. There are nuances, but they're roughly similar. So 3 types of agreements that you need to know about today. One is enterprise agreement. which is the most complex and the most traditional. I think it was introduced in about 2000, 2003. I don't remember the exact year, but that doesn't really matter. It's an old form of an agreement. And then there's MPSA, and I'll get to the basic details in a few seconds. Then there's MPSA, Microsoft Products and Services Agreement, which replaced. You don't have to remember that, but it replaced Select Plus. I know that in the United States, Select Plus was very popular, so I think it may ring a bell.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a new one, which came into existence, that I could be then again mistaken, 3 to 5 years ago. It's getting traction now, which is called CSP. Cloud. I think it stands for Cloud Solution Program. The other name for it, which is not the name of the agreement, it's the name of the umbrella agreement, is Microsoft Customer Agreement. CSP. CSP is the acronym you need to know. So Enterprise Agreement is the most popular one. And the reason it's popular is because Microsoft was pushing it and pushing it and pushing it. The Enterprise Agreement lobby inside Microsoft is still very strong.
Yes.
It's so the basics here are why you need to understand that. So one of the core principles of the enterprise agreement is there's always a commitment. To sign an enterprise agreement, you need to commit to something, to commit to license either all your users or devices with an enterprise platform. So another name for the commitment is platform or platform licenses. So if you sign an enterprise agreement, or there's another name, enterprise enrollment, because there are two types of enrollments inside the enterprise agreement. Strictly speaking, you sign an enrollment and whatever comes on top, agreement and other umbrella agreements that come just with it as a package. So when you sign an enterprise enrollment, you commit to license these days every user, because these days it's still possible to sign an enterprise agreement with the traditional per device platform licenses, the Office, the Windows, the old Windows, pre-Office 365, it still exists. And strictly speaking, nobody can stop you. There will be resistance, but nobody can stop you from signing it. So going back to the commitment, you still commit to license every single device or every single user. And to be honest, these days, it may not make sense. Right. Because it's not the same IT that was in 2003 or 2005. It's much more diverse. We have more diverse computing base. It's a 3-year agreement in which you commit to license everyone or everything with a certain set of platform licenses. There's another enrollment, which is called Sovereign Cloud Enrollment. You should know about it as well when you think about enterprise agreement, because you can sign just an enterprise agreement with an SCE. In some territories, Microsoft won't allow you to do that. But I don't believe you're going to have a problem doing that in the States. I need to check. There's not much business I do in the United States. It's there, you have to commit to license either every single server with Windows Server or every database with SQL Server. There's still a form of a commitment. And by the way, disregarding whatever other licenses you have, so you kind of buy them afresh, buy them anew. You cover every single bit of that particular product in your entire estate. From that, if you need to understand that, you need to really understand that. And think one of the most common problems is the bigger the company is, the bigger the chances it's going to happen. And I've seen it in 99. Unfortunately, that's my statistics, in 99% of the customers. When you commit to buy everything through the enterprise agreement, that basically means that you don't need to buy licenses outside of an EA. It's one side to that. What it also means that if you buy any license outside of that commitment, just through any other agreement, off the shelf, open license, which is dead now, but okay, MPSA, CSP, you buy a license in any other way, it creates an interesting conundrum because the license is legal. It's licensed to you. You may not use it. So it's money, effectively money wasted. So what you need to understand as well, so in addition to all the other all the other potential things, like, you commit to license all the users, and then the number shrinks, especially in our challenging times. There's almost no way you can reduce it. You still will have to pay for it for the next 3 years since you sign it. So and then the other trap is, suddenly buying something that you already bought as a platform license in any other way. Therefore, you're just basically wasting money. I cry sometimes when I see how much is wasted, because I'm a very empathic person, and when I see something isn't done right, I'm like, I so kind of empathize with people who did that. But on the other hand, you should have read the rules.
Right. Yes. And so I've had the pleasure of going through a divestiture, and I expect that to increase over the next few months as we come out of this pandemic. More and more companies having mergers and acquisitions or divesting of certain business units. That is a complex time, because you're either going up or going down a tier on the Microsoft scale, which increases pricing or decreases pricing. If somebody came to you and they just wanted some guidance on how should they look at those issues, those problems, how would you suggest they do so? Because it's going to mean all new agreements, right?
Yep. The first thing you need to do is, when you even have this first idea of a divestiture, and you own the business, tell it to your IT people, because and legal people, what they will need them to do is let them read the agreement. Just learn what's there. Microsoft are, I would say, in my experience, is the most transparent company when it comes to the rules. You don't have to do any sophisticated researches, or find someone who has a login to a hidden part of the website of the vendor to download the rules. The rules are there, and the rules of divestitures and acquisitions and mergers are actually written in all the agreements. And if not, there'll be a guidance somewhere at the Microsoft website that talks about it. So try and get a grasp of what you will face. But then the other thing I would suggest, and I'm talking like, if you don't have some people in your department, no in your company, or there's I remember that I think there's a series called Better Call Saul. So if you're not ready yet to call Saul, firstly, as I said, read the agreements themselves yourself, and then the second bit is get Microsoft on board. Because that's one of the instances. What I suggest, from my personal experience, you need to tell Microsoft to get someone from Microsoft helping you, because it's not an easy process. Some of the things that you will then, and you may negotiate things like that, like you just said, pricing will be completely reviewed. Not necessarily. It depends on what you negotiate. If you have just 1 year on your agreement, they may actually let you get away with another year in the same tier, which is not a standard solution, but this may be negotiated. It depends. Get them on board. I don't necessarily always suggest to start talking to Microsoft straight away when you plan something. You don't really need to tell them any of your plans. But events like that, like divestitures, I'd rather understand what's going on internally. I'd rather have all the cards laid out and discuss that. That comes from my experience. Wherever Microsoft was on board, even before the actual event, it usually went through much smoother. So that's what's preceding that. Yeah, that would be my advice.
And take that a step further. It's not a one solution, because like you said, the salesperson may be incentivized to sign you up for a new EA because that's how they're rewarded in their sales, or they may be rewarded in different ways. So that dialogue is key.
the problem is if you just follow without Microsoft, if you just follow standard rules, the problem is when you divest something, you need firstly to even be able to transfer any of your licenses, you need to divest a significant part of your business. If you divest, I don't know, a utility department that looks after utilities in your buildings, Microsoft may not see that as a substantial divestiture.
Right.
So that's one thing. You need to understand what you're doing. You need to discuss it with Microsoft. They may not agree to that. I'd rather know about it prior. Then actually, it's almost impossible without a very harsh negotiation, hard negotiation. And I used the word harsh actually with on purpose, although I'm not a native speaker, as you may have noticed, because it's not an easy one. Because then again, by default, you're really not allowed to split an enterprise agreement. And the problem is the licenses that you may be able to transfer to what's the word, novate,
yes,
to your divested entity, they won't have software assurance. There's no way you can transfer software assurance. And going back to things that you must understand about certain agreements is that in an enterprise agreement, which you will probably have, and you probably have it now, software assurance is an essential part. There's no way you can buy a license through an enterprise agreement without software assurance. So when you divest a certain entity, you kind of take a part of your business and make it a separate entity. You may transfer the licenses under certain conditions, but software assurance stays with you.
yes.
Well, firstly, it's money wasted because you have to pay for it, and then secondly, the problem is they will end up without software assurance. They need a plan. They need a plan what they're going to do, because unfortunately, Microsoft is probably the only company I know that together with maintenance, doesn't only package things like technical support or upgrade rights, which is what you think about when you think about maintenance. Yeah, just upgrade right and maybe technical support, ability to call support numbers, submit a support ticket. No, since 2012, Microsoft embedded some of the very vital rights into software assurance. And when you lose software assurance, you lose those rights. And just to give you one, I hope everyone will understand this example, because that's the one I refer to every time. When you have a modern on-premises infrastructure, there will be some sort of virtualization. It will be there. And if there's virtualization, you probably will have at least one cluster with at least 2 hosts. Thing is, in modern clusters, virtual machines travel from a host to a host for load balancing, disaster recovery, all the other conditions. Licenses are not allowed to travel between the hosts together with the VMs unless you have software assurance. So imagine they divest, they take a part of the infrastructure with them, they take licenses with them, but software assurance is not transferable. What happens? They become non-compliant. You need to really plan for it. It's not only about pricing, it's also about compliance, very much. What you end up with, it's almost like a divorce. Divorce is not an easy process. Divestiture affects licensing, Microsoft licensing, in a bad way.
And just like that, it also needs to be planned on the dollars on both sides, not just the price of the company, but the price to reacquire the software assurance. And I remember a lot of companies back in the early 2010 to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 that would go dark on their software assurance and say, okay, we'll just rebuy licenses as we need them, because software assurance was 20-something%, right? And so they did that. And that's why Microsoft put in these gotchas to say, no, you can't do it without software assurance, which is kind of an interesting thought. So you mentioned cloud a little bit. As organizations are incentivized to move to the cloud products, Microsoft's pushing them from on-prem. What are some of the common pitfalls to avoid? And is there any high-level guidance or advice that you would offer knowing everything's unique, right? I mean, every situation's unique, but as companies are pushed from on-prem to cloud, what guidance would you offer?
In general, software asset management, or
Yes, in Microsoft, because the Microsoft is pushing, just like 5 years ago or whatever, they pushed everybody from
yeah,
Office to Office 365. They're doing it with a lot of the data center products right now.
yeah. Well, Microsoft are incentivized to sell cloud. Then they don't get any bonuses on selling on-premises licenses. That's why, by the way, it's almost impossible to get any discounts on on-premises licenses, because what's the interest? They
Right.
have no interest in that. Uh, I would begin with the general things. So firstly, surprisingly, I mean, how many years have we had cloud? The message that uh, in cloud you have 0-day risks, and anything that you procure and forget to switch off costs you money. It's like a taxi meter. Taxi stands in there, you're using it, the clock is ticking anyway. So obviously pay attention to that. But also in conjunction with traditional licensing, what I see is there are two biggest pitfalls. There are lots of nuances, but the two things that I'd like to mention are: bring your own license. So organizations think without learning the details. They think they can just take their on-premise licenses and deploy them in the cloud. Well, we'll just deploy virtual machines in the cloud, and there's a big difference what cloud that is. Is it Azure, or is it AWS, or is it a third party that is not one of those, not Alibaba? So there's a list of 4 large providers, and all the rest. The rules are different, and in some cases you may bring your own licenses, and some you may not. In some cases you may bring your own licenses, deploy them on dedicated clouds, sort of private clouds that are built just for you, your dedicated hardware. And the biggest 4 providers since October 2019, you cannot. So there are nuances. Don't just assume, because that's a compliance issue. Don't just assume that you may take any licenses and bring them to cloud. You'll be up for a surprise if you have an audit. On the other hand, I think organizations also underestimate. They don't pay enough attention to the benefits that are provided by all the bring your own license benefits, because including, by the way, and that's why Microsoft maybe the Azure, maybe, or Azure, or whatever it's called in any country, is maybe the best choice from the pricing point of view, because Microsoft provide additional benefits when you bring your licenses to Azure or Azure. So look at that. Look where you can protect your investment in the software that you already have, that you're already paying for, where you can reuse that money in the cloud. And so-called Azure hybrid benefits are hugely underestimated. A friend of mine recently calculated the savings. Just sat down and decide, I'm not going to trust Microsoft, because Microsoft promised if we use reserved instances and we use our own licenses with the hybrid benefits, Microsoft are claiming you can save up to 80%. The claim is correct.
Oh, wow.
You just sat down with the calculators, with the price list, calculated it, 80% of savings on the cost of the virtual machines. I'm not mentioning connectivity or storage or anything. Just the cost of the compute of the virtual machines is much, much lower if you utilize your on-premises licenses. So I myself helped one company to optimize their enterprise agreement once, and out of the £3 million savings that we found that they can achieve on the renewal, what was the exact number? I think it was 350K per year they could save if they use those hybrid benefits in a clever way, according to their plans of migration. So there are a few ifs and caveats, but that was the number they could save by the end of the exercise per year. So two things. So the compliance issue, if you cannot just bring any of your licenses to the cloud, there are certain rules you must follow. And by the way, there are no licenses you can bring to the cloud without software assurance. Software assurance, again, is a compulsory thing. Yeah, imagine somebody's divested and then they want to go to the cloud. Well, I don't I don't want to be in that place. And on the other hand, look for potentials for savings and protecting your investment when you move to the cloud, because there are options, there are ways to protect your investment. There are very clever things that you can do. So, for instance, free advice: if you have an enterprise agreement, so if you want to migrate to the cloud, instead of purchasing full licenses with software assurance, what you can do is you can subscribe. You can buy subscription licenses through the server cloud enrollment, and you can use those subscription licenses in the cloud through those Azure hybrid benefits. So you're still on a subscription, it's still OpEx compared to cloud, same costing model, but you're saving 80% on compute, up to, from 30 to 80. And if you are a public sector organization, the discounts that you can get through an enterprise agreement and government-wide agreements in different countries, there are, like in the UK, there's a government-wide agreement with Microsoft. The discounts you get through that agreement, you will never get on Azure. And that's additional benefit of using those, benefit of using benefits in a clever way. I hope it makes sense.
Yes. And through all of that, it should be understood it's a complex issue. There's not one size fits all, but Microsoft's going to push you or incentivize you to go to the cloud, and every company is going to get there sooner or later. And it's how do you do it your way versus being forced to. Or there are a lot of companies now are going out of the data center business. They're saying, hey, we trust everything in the cloud. And so, which causes another realm of issue.
Microsoft is a bit of a nasty side in that regard. So I don't know if you watch SPLA, the server provider licensing program. If you look carefully at the numbers of authorized SPLA providers, they're going down. The reason is no new SPLA agreements are being signed. So Microsoft are pushing out SPLA providers. They want everyone to be in the cloud, which is not a secret. I'm not saying any secrets right now, but look at the numbers. And they're public.
And they're incentivizing you. So if you ever want to get a great deal on a Microsoft agreement, if you promise to incorporate more cloud, your incentives will go up, right?
That's absolutely correct. But if you allow me just a bit of word of warning here, so I would say go for it, but have a number of your own. Yes. So if Microsoft tell you, we think a company of your size, an organization of your size, will probably spend $1 million, £1 million, rupees next year in the cloud, have a number of your own and go conservative. Right. If just recently this week, somebody asked me, how would you approach this if you had no idea? Ask your IT department and then divide it by 3. Right.
Everything happens.
You will still get your discounts, but you will not waste your money, because the money you pay as a commitment, you can never get back. It's a one-way road.
Yeah, and no matter whether it's a home improvement project around the house or a project at software implementations or whatever it is, we all know it doesn't go as quickly as we hope. And so that's why I appreciate you talking about dividing by 3. So as we come out of this current pandemic and economic crisis, I suspect we're going to see an uptick in software audits. Some of the other publishers have done so. I expect Microsoft possibly to do the same. How would you advise organizations start preparing now in case they are audited?
I like how you put it when you said the word prepare, because although I think the biggest medals on my chest are from audit defense exercises, none of the consultants I know really like audit defense exercises. You need to start preparing. You need to be ready for an audit. Like a vendor can knock on your door tomorrow. That sort of readiness. And if you do that in a relaxed manner, not being stressed after receiving an audit letter, it's much easier. It's not as what was the word I'm looking for? It's not as disruptive. You control the pace. And when I say prepared, I don't mean like buy a tool or just be compliant. A good analogy would be you may know a subject, but you may not be ready for an exam. And I'm a good example, by the way. I was laughing. I know SPLA, Service Provider Licensing, inside out. I tried to pass a test on the Microsoft website. I failed. I knew SPLA. I know SPLA. I saved up to half a billion pounds to companies on in SPLA audit defense exercises. But I failed the exam. The same thing applies to being ready for an audit. And what I say, I mean, you may be compliant unless you have a sense of full sense of security. You may be compliant, but it doesn't mean when they come and they ask you to provide the data, they ask you where's your entitlement, you don't necessarily have it ready. It's those little things. Even if you're compliant, pull your act together. Have all those things that they talk to someone who knows how those exercises go, what they're asking for, and just make sure when they come, you can push a button and give it all to them, because that reduces disruption. And in my experience, Microsoft could be very harsh during an audit, and then when you go to the negotiation table, it becomes a commercial thing, and many companies end up paying nothing as audit penalties. But the disruption caused by the audit, that's the biggest cost. Yeah. That is where the biggest business risk is. Sometimes, depending on your size, an audit can go for a couple of years. I've seen that. I've been in that. Imagine having 10 to 20 people at least being busy just with the audit for 2 years. That's money lost. That's money lost. Those are processes disrupted, projects delayed for 2 years. It's not a good thing. So thank you again for the word prepare, because that's where the biggest value is. You just learn how. Ask someone. There are articles online. Ask me. Ask other SMEs how the audit is structured. What are the milestones? And then just imagine that it happens tomorrow and have a plan on how you prepare. And the other suggestion here is, as soon as you're ready, you have all your data, you know what buttons to push, you know where your entitlement is, you're ready to invite them tomorrow. Make sure you're updated. Say on a quarterly basis. Just have an exercise that updates those that data, that knowledge on a quarterly basis, and be ready.
Yep. Can't rely on just the tool, just the SAM tool. That's my one guidance is don't take that. So it's, to use a US term, lock, stock, and barrel. Do not. So you have to investigate and dive down a little bit and say, is this really what we want it to be?
Exactly. I don't even mention the tool. I have, but it's unfortunately it's the message that we keep repeating, but it doesn't fall through. No matter how many times you say you cannot rely on the tool, that message gets blocked. But there's a reason why we're repeating that, and we'll keep repeating it, and maybe one day it will fall through. People will realize that they cannot rely on the tool. So thanks for mentioning that. That I keep repeating sense of false sense of security. Sorry, it's the paradigm that came to my mind this morning. That's why I keep repeating it. I'm still kind of digesting that. That's what you get when you have, say, when you have a tool, you bought it, you installed it. You may not necessarily have properly configured it, and you look at the reports. You think, oh, yeah, the reports are brilliant. I'm compliant. I'm cool. you're not guaranteed that the auditors won't find something else. You're not guaranteed that you incorrectly against incorrect configuration of the tool. You're not guaranteed that the entitlement is just incorrect, and then you're not guaranteed that the tool is calculating the compliance correctly. There are lots of things that the tool must be looked after, and don't rely on the tool and audit. Be ready, get ready. Try and I mean, you can do a mock exercise. Invite someone who's an independent some consultant or a company that is not anyhow tied with license sales. So I would stay away from those that sell licenses.
Right. I
have my reservations about it. Always been working with independent companies. So and just do a kind of like a mock audit, role play.
Yep.
And that way you'll uncover all the shortcomings of your organization, because sometimes you just don't see them.
Right.
And I know where to look.
We all need help. We all need more help than we realize in those regards. I mean, we all think we know it more than we do. So lastly, yes, COVID has impacted everyone in many ways. How has it impacted the software asset management space, in the Microsoft segment? It's a hard question.
Just limited to Microsoft. No, I know the answer. Obviously, it's obvious that the adoption of working from home has affected the usage patterns of certain software. And actually, if you're an Office 365 subscriber and you're squeaky clean, which I've never seen, but imagine, hypothetically, all the licenses that you have are subscription licenses, that doesn't affect you much, because they are online licenses. You assign licenses online. People may use them through terminal service, Citrix service. You're probably familiar with those names. But if you so remote access is one of the biggest compliance pitfalls in the Microsoft licensing. If you use traditional software, Project Visio, Office Professional Plus installed, and people consume them from home, check the licensing model. Check if you have enough rights included with your particular license. So, for instance, I may be wrong, but I think even Office 365 through CSP doesn't have terminal server activation rights. I need to check. That's the thing with Microsoft licensing. You cannot always trust your memory. You need to check. Fortunately, all the product terms are available for download. So, but other thing, if you provide access to traditional Office from home, you need to have software assurance. So it's those things. That is the area that is the most affected in regards to software asset management with Microsoft. But also, software asset management itself doesn't exist, as you know really well, in an isolated space. It's not in a vacuum. It's connected to all the other things, including hardware asset management.
Right.
So your traditional asset retirement, asset retention process becomes even more valid, and it does affect licenses that are installed on software that is the binaries that are deployed on those devices, and therefore the licenses that must be assigned to those devices or users. So that is how COVID affected the Microsoft software asset management space.
So I even thought of, if people are now working from home and they have their Office on more than one device, but their O365 is per user or per device. But if it's somehow per device, now you have to worry, right? I mean, there's a lot of intricacies that people have to check out.
It's pretty rare, but yes, you may subscribe per device. There's an option. Fortunately, it's as I said, it's pretty rare. It's not commonplace.
Good. Only because.
But if you do have a per device, I would say the more you mobilize your workforce, and obviously now we're forced to do so, the more you should look towards per user licenses. How do you count the device? How do you know that? And auditors, if you're unlucky and you have an audit, auditors will assume the worst.
That's their job. That is their job. Alexander, you have been a great guest. We thank you for being on here. How can the audience get in touch with you? And I know from your LinkedIn profile, you have great explanation YouTube videos. How can the audience how can they find you?
Thank you. And thank you for having me here. I'm really delighted. The easiest way to connect with me is actually to find me on LinkedIn. And from there, just research what other platforms I'm on. I'm mostly present on LinkedIn. All my YouTube videos are somehow shared on LinkedIn, obviously. So just look up my name, Alexander Golev, or actually the short URL is linkedin.com/in/GOLEV, Golf Oscar Lima Echo Victor. That is my profile. And from there, you can find links to my YouTube channel, which is called Sam Expert TV.
Sam Expert TV on YouTube. You've gained a lot of subscribers recently, and rightfully so. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And hope you have a great day. Thank you, audience.